Hello, college biology. This is Cellular Respiration Part 2, Meet the Mitochondria. In Part 1, we discussed the big picture about cellular respiration. We saw that it's a maddening, like 20 to 30 chemical reactions. We saw that there's 4 different phases, and that the big picture is we break down glucose to get its electrons, we move its electrons to transport proteins that help us pump hydrogen, and then we use the hydrogens to actually make ATP. So that was the big picture. Let's meet the mitochondria and get another look at what's going on here before we go back to the nitty-gritty of cellular respiration. All right, here is a picture, and we've got our cells here. These are the borders between the cells, and you can see that the mitochondria are, fairly reasonably sized organelles within them, and that there are several mitochondria because different cells, you need a lot of mitochondria to help make ATP because our cells are doing all kinds of crazy chemical reactions, and some cells need more mitochondria than others. Muscle cells use a lot of mitochondria, whereas other cells that might not be doing so much, they won't need as much mitochondria. So here is this. Now I have another zoomed in and a picture of a mitochondria, and we can get a little more details of the regions in the mitochondria. The innermost section is called the mitochondrial matrix, and this section is where a lot of the chemical reactions that we're concerned about take place. And one interesting thing about mitochondria is that it has ribosomes. So if you see the little splotchy, like things that are kind of out of focus, the little splotchy dots, those could be ribosomes. So the mitochondria make their own protein, and that means they have their own DNA. Mitochondria has their own DNA. Organelle has its own DNA. Nucleus, you run the rest of the cell. I got my stuff taken care of. So they have their own DNA. They have their own ribosomes. So they kind of build themselves and run themselves. Now, so they've got the matrix. They've got the inner membrane. It turns out that they have 2 layers of membrane. They have the inner membrane, which makes these long, thin folds on the interior of the mitochondria. And then, of course, they have their outer membrane, which, acts as the border of the mitochondria, the outer border of the mitochondria. And then they have the inner membrane space, and that is the region between the two. So if you have 2 layers, you got to have that space between. So those are those are important regions, and we're going to talk about every single one of these in the course of cellular respiration. The deep inner matrix, the inner membrane space that separates the inner membrane, and then finally the outer membrane. Here is another model of a ribosome. You can see that it has the matrix, the most inner part, the inner membrane space, the space between the yellow inner membrane and the red bordered outer membrane. And then it has this thing that they call cristae. These are shown the same way here, these long thin things. These are the infoldings of the inner membrane. So it's like the inner membrane and the outer membrane are all buddied up here, but then the inner membrane folds and we have this long thin infold. Same thing over here, very, very long thin infolding. So the inner membrane is actually much longer than the outer membrane. It's just way folded up so that a lot of it is interior. And we've got its own ribosomes and its own DNA and such. So those are the basics of the mitochondria. Now that we're comfortable with those regions, that's going to be the end of this video. We're going to start the next video to deal with phase 1 of respiration, glycolysis, and we'll refer back to the different regions of the mitochondria during the rest of our discussion of cellular respiration. I hope this helps. Struggle well.